Yeah. Uh. Yeah.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to Prospect Prep. This is episode 5. We do apologize that we weren't here last week. Had some stuff going on, but we are back at it again. Had a lot of stuff go down in the college football ranks through week 4, and so today's episode we're pretty much going to talk about the top performers through the season so far, some news that's going on, and then we have our first top 10 list for each position. That we'll go through. Me and Cody both made up. But Cody, how's it going today?
Oh, not too bad. You know, life happens sometimes. We just couldn't record last week. We apologize, but we're back.
And yeah, we got little change to the show this week. Instead of just going through the same boring games and talking about the same. Well, I guess I will be talking about the same players because, I mean, the top guys are still going to be the top guys for the most part, but. Let's talk a little bit about what happened specifically in week 4. A few teams suffered their first loss. Colorado going down to Oregon, however you want to say it. Ole Miss suffering their first loss. UCLA, Oregon State, Iowa, and Notre Dame on that very last second touchdown that was that to OSU. And I mean, those are the key games. Of course, other teams suffered some losses too, but anything that sticks out to you there? Colorado went into that game as 21-point underdogs, and I know we get all the hype and all that stuff, but they did not show up. They ended up losing that game 42-6. I mean, that was the biggest game, I think, as far as hype goes. But definitely not the biggest game of the week or anything like that. Any of those other teams stick out to you?
The Iowa one shouldn't have been as surprising as it was to me because Penn State was the better team. But I have a lot of friends that are Iowa fans, so they're just completely fed up with the offensive coordinator there, and he needs to be fired because he can't score a touchdown at all, and they have the talent. So everyone's pretty bummed around here about that. And yeah, like you said with Colorado, I think really fun. The crazy thing about it is I think this week is going to be a little bit closer against USC. I'm not saying that Oregon's the better team, but I might be saying that because just overall, they might have weapons everywhere. I didn't believe in Oregon's defense as much as I thought I was going to, and Oregon's defense might be better than USC's, and that might be the outlier when they play in the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah, it should be a little better game. I know Colorado opened up against TCU, so they had a little taste of a little tougher opponent, I guess. But Oregon definitely the toughest game that they had on the schedule so far, and now USC. So now Dion has a little more ammo to go into this game, and it's still a big spread. I mean, Colorado dropped in the ranks too. They're out of the top 25 now. They're still without Hunter. I don't know if he's coming back this week.
He's not. Sure. Yeah, that's the tough thing. You lost your best 2-star player, or your 2-way player, so that's gonna be pretty tough to come back from.
So yeah, they got a tough road ahead of them. As far as I don't want to stay on Colorado too long, but I know before last week's game, before they played Oregon, they had 6 scheduled games on their schedule that were against ranked opponents. And they were ranked themselves too. They earned the right to be ranked. I think they were 19 going out last week. But yeah, I mean the road it's not going to get easier for them. But I mean they've exceeded expectations so far as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, their over under for games win or won this year is 3.5. So they're pretty close to that mark already. I'm glad I hit the over on that because there's no way they're not going to win 4.
Yeah, the game that I really want to talk about, and it's more personal to me, and if anybody played, it really wasn't. I guess it was kind of a boost. It was on DraftKings. They pre-made one of those parlays where they put 10 favorites together. Oregon State was one of the favorites on there, but OSU was on there, FSU was on there, just all money lines. And if you played it, then the profit boost was 100%. So whatever the odds were, they just basically doubled the odds. And
Nice.
Oregon State ended up losing by 3 in that game. And they didn't. It really wasn't as competitive as the final score was. Oregon State kind of made a little run at the end to kind of get back into it, but that just I was as one of the later games too, because obviously they're out west, and I was just not happy with that. Hit 9 of the 10 legs on there, and
Hmm.
other people I know they cashed out that ended up playing the boost, and it's always tricky when you play something that like the app puts together for you. You think it's kind of a think it's a like a trap or something like that, but I played it through the max was like $10, I think you could put on it, so it wasn't really anything crazy, but would have had a nice payout if Oregon State could have pulled that off. I mean,
I think that
the
and they were the other team that had the coming to Jesus moment. It's like, oh, we might not be as good as we thought, and that's Oregon State for sure. But I
yeah.
mean, Washington State's also a really good team.
Yeah, Washington State being at home too, and their top 25 rankings aren't too far apart, or at least weren't at the time of the game. I don't know why Oregon State was favored.
Yeah.
It definitely could have gone either way. Obviously, it did. Um, let's get into any other games, not the one loss games from last week, but any other games stick out from you from last week, or do you want to move on?
Oh, we can move on.
All right, so we compiled the top performers basically through the 4 weeks. Um, So I'll just get right into it. The top quarterbacks as far as yards go, I'll give you the top 5 of each, and then if there's any stat where they're tied or 3, 4, and 5 have the same amount, I'll just mention the names. But for quarterbacks, the top 5 through yards, Michael Penix from Washington has 1,636 yards. Shador Sanders from Colorado, 1,410. They did have that week 0 game. So some of these players did play in week 0. They have that extra game. I don't think any of them had their bye yet. I know FSU has their bye this week. Cameron Ward, Washington State, 1,394 yards. Braden Schrager from Hawaii, I know they had a week 0 game as well, 1,348 yards. And then Jaden Daniels, your boy from LSU, 1,296 coming in at number 5. And outside of Shager, all the other quarterbacks are above 72% pass completion percentage to all double-digit touchdowns, which is, I mean, really good at this point. And really the highest interceptions too is going to be Jaden Daniels and Michael Penix at 2 interceptions. So all really good, just really good quarterback performances going on this year, and putting up some yards. And I'll be talking about Michael Penix a little bit later too.
Yeah, and I mean, what's the most important thing for scouts and the scouting combine for quarterbacks is accuracy. So you seeing 4 of the top 5 guys for yardage having above 70%, you're going to take that all day. So the passing touchdown leaders is a little bit of a different list, but there's still some people on the list that are the same, including Penix. He's at 16. Caleb Williams, USC, he's at 15. Sam Hartman is at Notre Dame, 14. CJ Montez of Fordham has 13, and Cam Ward from Washington State has 13.
Yep. So like I said, touchdowns going all around. It's a lot of passing going on. Really fun to watch, and that's another thing. Obviously, accuracy is something that you want to see, but tape too. Like Michael Penix, Caleb Williams are putting out the tape that you want to see, and that's why these guys are going to be closer to the top of our rankings. I know, at least in my rankings, I think Williams is definitely 1. I don't know where he is on yours, but he's definitely 1 for me, and I think Penix was 2 or 3. I got to double check, but we'll talk about that when we get to our we'll get to that segment. As far as rushing yards, a couple under the radar names here: Sam Franklin from Tennessee Martin with 653, Shunderick Powell out of Central Arkansas with 632, Audric Estime from Notre Dame 591, Nate Knoll from Appalachian State 542, and Darius Taylor from Minnesota 532. So outside of maybe Taylor and Audric Estime from Notre Dame, a lot of lower schools for rushing yards here.
And that shouldn't come as a big surprise. Quarterback play is not nearly as good, so they really don't want to keep it in that player's hands. And some of the unproven linemen and the really bad defensive lines are in those divisions. So yeah, the running backs are going to eat a little bit more in those. Transitioning to running backs for touchdowns, it's pretty much the same thing. Jordan Fuller, Holy Cross, has 9 rushing touchdowns. Marcus Carroll from Georgia State has 8. Blake Corum from Michigan has 8. And then 7 players are tied with 7. I don't have the 7 players listed, but there's 7.
Yeah, just didn't want to rattle off 7
Oh, yeah.
names.
No.
For yards for wide receivers, receiving yards, Xavier Leggett, we've mentioned him a couple times on this podcast, from South Carolina for 556. Romo Dunes from Washington, one of Michael Penix's top targets, with 544. Malik Neighbors from LSU, 523. Luther Burden from Missouri, 504. And Kobe Hudson from Central Florida with 463. So makes sense that a Washington guy and an LSU guy would be on here, because a Washington guy and an LSU guy are on the passing yardage list.
Yep. They all make sense. And yeah, that sophomore Luther Burden, he keeps impressing. And he's a force to be reckoned with. And I mean, that's a big reason why Missouri is now ranked, is him. I really think so. Transitioning to the wide receiver touchdown list, 7 players are tied with 6. And those 7 players are Jalen Coker from Holy Cross, Will Shepard from Vanderbilt, which we've named off before, Roman Wilson from Michigan, Terrell Vaughn from Utah State, Kean Coleman from Florida State, Juwan Newton, Toledo, and Jeff Caldwell, Lindenwood.
All right, yeah, so those are basically the league leaders in those categories up through now. About a third of the season so far gone. Some of these guys we're going to be seeing in the NFL next year, and I'm pretty sure a handful of these guys we're going to have on our top 10 lists that's coming up in a little bit. Let's talk about the games of the week this week. And so doing a little bit differently than we did it last time. Last time we mentioned pretty much every single game that was going to be featured on a major network, ESPN, FS1, and then your local channels. Today we just basically mentioned, I think it was 10 games that are going to be exciting. Some of them might be on like an SEC network or Pac-12 network or whatever, but we'll mention the 10 games that we have, talk a little bit about them, and then and then it's a full slate. There's some bye weeks this week. Like I said, I mentioned FSU was one of them. I don't really have off the top of my head the other teams that are going to be on bye this week, but you got a lot. There's a lot of good games. I think last week only had a couple ranked versus ranked teams. This week has a lot more. You're gonna get some really good games, starting out with Utah up against Oregon State. Number 10 Utah going up against number 19 Oregon State. That's going to be Friday this week at 8 p.m. I believe it's 9 p.m. Eastern. I think you're 1 hour behind me.
Yeah, sorry. These are Central Time.
All right, so 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central on FS1. What do you got for that game?
Who do I have for that game? I'll probably take Utah. Utah is usually, or their defense is going to give DJ Ugalele some trouble, and yeah, he's a little reckless, and I think that's going to still come out.
Yeah, Oregon State's dead to me. I'm done with them.
Yeah, just done with them. So for the next game, starting on the 11 or noon slate on Saturday, it's not a ranked game, but it's always a good game to watch, and that's Florida versus Kentucky. It's a really good rivalry. Florida is ranked at 22, and that's noon on ESPN. If you're not watching the USC Colorado game and you're just kind of sick of watching Colorado, that's another game that it's pretty much a bloodbath every year. So it's always fun. Even if Kentucky's 1-11, they're going to show up for the game against Florida.
Yeah, some of these, it's funny how that works too, isn't it? Like some of these teams are having the roughest season, but you know that one game of the year that they look forward to, and it's hard to bet that game. It's hard to, but it is fun to watch. I mean, you could get a 6-3 game, or you could get a 38-35 game, and you know that Kentucky is just, they're going to be going in there balls to the wall, with everything that they got. You already mentioned it, but USC and Colorado, 8-ranked USC, that's going to be on Saturday at noon. That's going to be on Fox. So your local channels, flipping through, be able to get to see Sanders, Caleb Williams, Dorian Singer, Mario Williams, and should be a good game. I'll get the spread for that one as you talk about the next one, but just to see if it's around that 21 like the Oregon game was. But there's a lot of NFL talent in that game. It might be the end of the at the end of the score. At the end of the day, the score might be a couple touchdown score for USC, but it's you're gonna. I think Colorado's going to come out a lot better than they did last week, and it probably still lose by double digits. But I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a lot better game. Deion's going to be a little bit more prepared for what he's going to be facing in a top team like that.
I agree with you totally. But the next game we're going to talk about is, I think, going to be my game of the week. And that's 24 ranked Kansas versus number 3 Texas. That's Saturday, September 30th at 2:30 p.m. or 3:30 p.m. on ABC. Texas is riding high. I mean, they're playing really good ball, but you can never – right now, you can't take Kansas for granted. They have a really good running back in Devin Neal. They have a really good quarterback in Jalen Daniels. And they're flying around and making it difficult on guys. So if it might be a trap game for Texas. I hope not, because I really like seeing Texas up there. It just makes for a better college football slate having them ranked so high. And I mean, I'm an SEC fan through and through. So it's nice seeing different teams in the top 4. So I'm hoping for a good game.
Yeah, should be a good one. Got some talent on the Texas side as far as what we're going to be seeing in the NFL next year. Xavier Worthy, Quinn Ewers. I believe we probably both have the tight end on our tight end list.
Yep.
As far as our top 10s go. The next game we got, you already mentioned them. Missouri is coming in ranked at number 23 up against Vanderbilt. Up in the earlier section of this podcast, we mentioned a couple players from each of those teams so far. That's going to be on Saturday at 3 or 4 o'clock Eastern on ESPN. So that's another game that throw it on ESPN. You could watch. ESPN Plus probably should have it too. I believe all the ESPN games are on ESPN Plus as well. Plus ESPN Plus also carries.
I messed that one up. It is on the SEC network, but it's on ESPN Plus. Yeah. So.
All right. So yeah, Missouri Vanderbilt should be a good game. Like I said, we mentioned a couple of those guys already. And here, lined up perfectly for you.
It did lined it up. Number 13 ranked LSU is going into and playing Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss team, who's ranked 20th. Saturday, September 30th, 5 p.m. And that game is on ESPN. It's another bloodbath. It's going to be – this game's always close, no matter what. So I'm pretty excited to watch it.
Yeah, Ole Miss, they had a little stinker this past week against Bama, but it should be a fun game. LSU is always fun to watch too. South Carolina up against number 21 ranked Tennessee. That's going to be Saturday as well on the SEC network at 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central. Tennessee with some nice talent out there. Joe Milton, the quarterback, big guy. He's not on my list. I don't know if he's on your list, but he's definitely somebody to watch out for. Could be a nice little project in the NFL. Probably see him on a practice squad next year and maybe get a handful of games eventually. Nothing really to write home about, but definitely fun to watch in college.
If we would have done our top 10s last week, he probably would have made my list. But we saw a lot during that Florida game to be, okay, he hasn't made those steps forward yet. So he's off that list at the moment. But the next game is another probably game of the week. I mean, college game day is going to be there. It's going to be a good game to watch. That's 11th ranked Notre Dame versus Duke. It's going to be the coming out party for Riley Leonard, I think. I mean, he's going to go out there and sling the rock. That's Saturday at 6:30 on ABC. So 7:30?
7:30 for us, yep.
7:30 Eastern time, yeah, on ABC. That's going to be a fun game.
And then the next game we got is going to be number 12 Bama versus Mississippi State. They got Ole Miss last week. They're up against Mississippi State this week. That's this Saturday at 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central on ESPN. Bama, they're not really the same Bama that we're used to, but they're still up there, still hanging around. Had a double-digit win last week against Ole Miss. I know fans are calling for quarterback switch out there, but they definitely got some talent to. I mean, they always have talent, but they definitely got some players that we're going to be seeing in pro unis next year.
I was really surprised when they switched from Jalen Milroe, to be honest, and then they went with the two other guys, and Milroe didn't even come into the game, and I was like, That didn't make much sense to me. It's like if you're going to go with a guy, just stick with him for at least a little bit,
Mhm.
not just 3 weeks. But it is what it is. I'll just take the last two here because one's on the Pac-12 network, which a lot of people don't get. But that's Washington versus Arizona. I put the game on the list because Washington's really fun to watch.
Yeah.
And they're at 10 p.m. on the Pac-12 network on Saturday. And then a game that we can watch, that's 9:30 p.m. for all the late watchers and people have to get their kids to bed. Fresno State, Nevada. It's probably not going to be close because Nevada's not very good, but Fresno State's fun to watch as well. They have a pretty good offense that I like watching, and that's on FS1 at 10:30 p.m.
And with my work schedule, working until about 7 p.m. on Saturday nights, those after 7:30 games are the ones that I'm going to be looking into and throwing some wagers on and be able to sit back and live bet them or stuff like that. So those are the three that we mentioned that are going to be the ones that I'm going to be into. Actually, five because a couple of them start at 7:30. So get home and get ready to go. All right, our last segment that we got, we're going to talk about our how we rank the top 10 of each position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. Now, we are the big meat and potatoes of going for two is we're a fantasy show, and that's why we really only talk about these specific positions too. Don't really get into too much. I mean, we get into IDP. I do the IDP show for the NFL on Friday nights, but we're more so just trying to find those rookies that we're going to be spending our 2024 rookie picks on next year for our dynasty leagues, and it's going to be a lot of these guys that we mentioned. And so what we'll do is basically just go one by one how what we have, and if there's any discrepancies, talk about it a little bit, but won't get too deep into them because this is after however far they are into their career, juniors or seniors, but also a lot of it is what happened over the first 4 weeks so far this NFL or NCAA season as well. So my number one quarterback, which is probably your number one quarterback, Caleb Williams. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
All right. He should be the unanimous number one overall pick. There's really not even like a edge rusher or offensive tackle that's really up there. That's like kind of competing with him this year, like you see in other years, where you got
like Chase Young or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good example too. Chase Young and Joe Burrow that year too, and it ended up being Burrow at the end of the day, but it was a good choice too. But like there's really not that secondary position that's going to push Caleb. I mean, most of the teams. I mean, unless it's like, it's off the top of my head, I can't even think of a team, but like a team that already has their, say Carolina finishes first overall, maybe they go Marvin Harrison then. So that's really the only way, unless they trade out of the pick. But for the most part, if you're picking in the top one, you're taking Caleb Williams.
Yep. My number two, I think, is your number two as well. That's Drake May, UNC.
Yeah.
Even though I don't want him to be, but he is. He is what he is. I can see my number three maybe overtaking him because I don't know. He's solid and stuff, but he's almost too gunslinger for me. And that's saying a lot because I love the gunslingers. Like when I was young, I really liked watching Brett Favre and stuff, but man, that stuff doesn't work anymore. Like, I think he's going to have a little bit of trouble with that. I think he's a Baker Mayfield type that he's going to have a lot of hype coming out and then he might fizzle out. And I hope not. And I hope I'm eating my words, but he's still going to get high praise for that and for that talent. He's got that. So,
and the one thing that he has, which is why I put him at number two, he does have he has rushing ability, and
he does.
And if we're a fantasy show, and that's where that kind of was a tiebreaker for me. My number three is probably not your number three. I think my number four is your number three, but that's Michael Penix. Already talked about him. The downside to him really is he doesn't have really that rushing ability. I mean, we've seen him run a little bit, but he's also doing it with a couple guys that, I mean, I got two of his receivers on my top 10 receivers too. So like, can he? Obviously, he's going to be playing with NFL talent in the NFL, which these guys, for the most part, should be NFL talent as well. But the Pac-12 really isn't that great defensively. He's so is it going to be something where it takes a little bit of time to kind of transition to the NFL game, faster game, or can he come in and just continue what he's doing at Washington in the big leagues?
I agree with you totally, and he was my number 3
Oh
actually.
wow.
So I've liked what I've seen from him, and like you said, he's got 2 of the top 10 wide receivers. So I mean we have to take that into account, even if they are Pac-12, and they're putting up the numbers to show it that they're playing in the Pac-12 and they're going to blow people out because of it. They're that good. My number 4, I am buying the hype, and I just like him. It's Shadur Sanders from Colorado. I He's got the moxie. He just does. He has that capability. I think he would be able to sell jerseys. He'd get fans in the seats on the next level. And he's probably not coming out this year, but I hope he does, because I think he's going to be one of those flyers that you take. He's the most Anthony Richardson in this draft to me, and I like that upside.
Yeah, so he wasn't my 4. I actually have him at 5.
Okay.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels at 4. And one of the tiebreakers was because you said he might not come out this year.
Yep.
And so we're kind of looking at 2024 here. I still have him in my top 5, but with NIL deals in college now, and his dad being there for going through a full season and then maybe going into 2024, maybe he's like, hey son, come back for your senior year, let's do this together, and then go off to the NFL. Let's do one more year together, let me coach you for another year. So that's kind of where I'm worried with Sanders, is that he doesn't come out this year. But I think that if he comes out, he should be. I think that any one of the top 5 so far that we mentioned, or 4 that you mentioned, and 5 that I mentioned, could be first round picks, like kind of like that 2018 draft where
Yep.
Lamar was taken 32, and we could be seeing that. Even my numbers, maybe I don't know. Even my number 6 possibly could sneak in there, but I don't know if there's gonna be 6 teams looking for quarterbacks next year, so maybe not. But yeah, so my 1 through 5 is Caleb Williams, Drake May, Michael Penix, Jaden Daniels, and Shadur Sanders. And who's your 5?
My 5 is actually Riley Leonard from
Okay.
Duke. I really like what I see from him too. I think he's got the head of an NFL player, and I think that's going to take him a long ways.
Daniel Jones Jr. got it.
Yeah, I hope he's a little bit better than Daniel Jones, but yeah, I mean, I can see it. But look, he got a second contract, so.
Yeah, you did.
But I'm also not going to take him 7th or 7 overall. If I can get him in the 20s or even in the second round, I'm very happy with that.
All right, so looks like we're going to start to get a little bit of a differentiation here. My number 6 is Quinn Ewers out of Texas, like he's doing down there. He's up there with the other guys as far as throwing touchdowns and throwing for yardage, and he's got the weapons out in Texas. I think we're going to have a couple other Texas guys on our list together. So yeah, it's my number 6.
I have Cameron Ward. I think he's the one that I really like his arm. He doesn't have very many good weapons, but he's still showing out. He reminds me of Teddy Bridgewater at Louisville. He really does. And I like that upside. I mean, he's one of those quarterbacks that just isn't being talked about, and I really want him to be. So I might manifest it. And my computer is about to die, so I'm just going to go grab my charger real quick, and I'll be right back.
All right. And then, yeah, when I thought about putting Cameron Ward up there, I actually have him on my list at 8. So I thought I'd be a little bit more. I thought my listing of 8 would be a little bit more surprising, but having him at 6 is definitely a shock there. Well, not really a shock because I mean we both have seen him. I especially during the Oregon State game, he looked really good. He was hitting his receivers. He was getting out of the pocket. I can't remember how many rushing yards he had exactly, but I really got a chance to get a good look at him against Oregon State, and that's kind of like where I fell a little bit more in love with him. So I had, like I said, I have him on my list at 8. So Ewers at 6, Ward at 8. Sandwiched in between them is Jordan Travis out of FSU, another guy who's got a plethora of weapons that we're most likely going to talk about on our lists. He's about 6'1", 210, could definitely put on a few more pounds, but he's leading that FSU team to potentially a playoff. They dropped one spot in the top 25. I think they went into last week number 4. They're 5 now, after that hard fought battle with Clemson. But I think the FSU offense it's pretty complete with players all across the board, and he's a big reason for it.
I have Sam Hartman, Notre Dame. I know it's his 6th year, so I know he's coming out. That's why I have him a little bit higher. But it's also he's got that leadership. I like that in a quarterback. When he comes to the next level, he's not going to get scared. So I think that's why I like him. Now, does that translate to wins or being the starting quarterback? Probably not. But he's probably going to be in the league for 10 years, probably mostly as a backup, but I still like his upside.
And I'll mention my last 2. Hartman is one of them, and then I'll throw in a little bonus, and because these three I have I think are kind of all, they're not really the same, not really similar bodies of work, but they're similar to how I view them in the NFL. And I think that 1 through 8 for me, Williams, May, Penix, Daniels, Sanders, Ewers, Travis, and Ward could have significant minutes in the NFL, whether it's waiting a year or 2 to get under center, or it's right off the bat, week 1 of their rookie year. But then the next couple guys, Hartman, Nix, and then as a bonus, Rattler. I think that
Okay.
they're going to be more journeyman guys. They're going to be good locker room guys, and if you have to get a spot start because a starter goes down, practice squad for a couple years out of their career, I think that's kind of where those guys fit in. And JJ McCarthy is actually one of those guys too. I'll throw his name in there as well. So those 4 guys, like, they're probably going to be on NFL rosters to start next year, and I think for the most part, maybe half of those guys, so 2 of those guys are probably going to be on a practice squad. They're going to get a lot of preseason time, but I don't think over the course of their 8 to 10 year careers are going to be really anything big in the NFL.
Yeah, so I have Williams, May, Penix, Sanders, Leonard, Ward, Hartman. And then the last 3 that I have Jalen Daniels, and Tyler Van Dyke. And I mean, I like Jaden Daniels, but I think he's getting a bad rep, and I think people just think he's a Tyrod Taylor type. I don't think that's the case, but that's why I put him at the ranking of 8. I think Jalen Daniels of Kansas is always getting sleep on because he's just the quarterback at Kansas. And Tyler Van Dyke is balling right now. And he's always had some accuracy issues and stuff like that, but his team is 4-0 right now with Miami. And if they keep balling like that and they get to 11-1 season, he's going to keep climbing up ranks. I like what he's been doing. So that's my list. The big surprise is I don't have Jordan Travis. I don't believe in him. I think it's a case of he's got a lot of weapons around him and stuff like that. I mean, NFL, that's every team has weapons, right? I get it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I wouldn't put him in my top 10 right now. And yeah, Ewers, I need to see a little bit more as well. The Bama game really helped. So he's probably 11 on this list, but I need to see a little bit more. I need him to have some big games against some of these other ranked opponents like Kansas this week.
Yeah, that's we gave about, what was that, 14, 15 names that some of them are going to be starting next year. Others are going to be sitting on our taxi squads and hoping that kind of seeing what happens next.
Yep.
The next position is this position that in fantasy, these are the guys that I think that are really important to kind of hit on, especially like maybe the top 4 or 5 guys. These are going to be guys that like everybody, even the casual dynasty guys, are going to know. But then after that, it's like you want to find that Damian Pierce, you want to find that Tyjae Spears, guys that are going to be in your 3rd, 4th round of your rookie drafts, your Roshan Johnsons, and we're going into week 3 of the NFL, week 4 of the NFL.
Week 4, yep.
Week 4 of the NFL, and we're finally getting to see Roshan get a little bit more work, and Tyjae Spears is out touching and not outplaying, but out like being on the field longer than Derrick Henry in Tennessee, and these are the kind of guys that we want to hit on. So a couple of these guys, like I said, the top end of these guys, they're going to be I think the number one, and I've mentioned him 8 million times already, but Braylon Allen. For fantasy, like it's kind of like in between 1 and 2 for like he personally my number 1. He runs like my number 1. He kind of reminds me of like a Derrick Henry, big body guy. You just give him the rock, he's just gonna go right in the middle of the offensive line. He's not gonna try to bounce it outside. He doesn't have he's shifty and he's fast, but he's not that kind of guy. He's gonna just bully you basically.
Yep.
But if we're talking fantasy, really the catches aren't there, the receptions aren't there, but if you could put together 1,800 rushing yards on the ground, maybe 15 touchdowns, you might not necessarily need it like Derrick Henry. So I'm still going to keep him at 1, although there are guys on this list that are going to be better out of the backfield, like an Austin Eckler or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, if I didn't put Braylon Allen number 1, I think he'd come and find me and fight me. So yeah, no, he's my number 1 as well. I think I exactly what you said. And he's been showing this year a little bit more that he can catch. It's just not that offense. So I think scouting combine is going to be really big for him in that regard, and I think he'll be pretty good. My number 2 is probably your number 2, maybe, but I mean it's a variable list. But my number 2 is Raheem Sanders for Arkansas. He's dynamic. He's made KJ Jefferson's life so much easier, even though they did get blown out last week. But I like what he offers.
Yeah, and that's obviously if Allen wasn't my 1, Sanders would be my 1. He does offer a little bit more in the passing game. So in a PPR league, even half PPR league, Sanders might have a little bit more value than somebody like Allen does. Allen is like your Chubb or Henry. Sanders is like your, I don't want to call him Eckler because he is bigger too. Sanders is definitely bigger than.
I think a good comparison between these two are Jonathan Taylor and J.K. Dobbins. A lot of people were taking Dobbins over Jonathan Taylor. But now we're seeing, Dobbins can't stay healthy, and well, now with Taylor stuff now, but he produced as a running back without the receptions for the most part.
Yeah, that's it, and that's what we want as far as out of our running backs. And Sanders is going to be in rookie dress. He's probably going to be a 1st-round pick.
For sure.
Especially in single quarterback leagues, you got a handful of wide receivers and maybe 3 or 4 running backs that are going to be going in your 1st rounds. Another one that's probably going to be going in your 1st round, Blake Corum, Michigan. That's my number 3. He's phenomenal, even with another guy out there in Donovan Edwards, who's my number 8. So I'll just spoil it now. So I got both Michigan guys on my top 10 there. But even with they're just that 1-2 punch that we see a lot of these teams do, like Javonte Williams and Michael Carter back at UNC. Both these Michigan guys, they're going to be, I mean, and this is what we say about like every running back that comes out of the draft, but hopefully they're drafted to ideal situations, and we as fantasy players can utilize them as early as possible. But because we don't want to wait on any of these guys, especially with the short shelf life of running backs. But I think that they're both going to be in the NFL. I think they're both going to be fine. And we're seeing a shift in the NFL where it is more 50-50 splits or 60-40 splits. So hopefully we get Blake Corum as a Batman to somebody's Robin and just get 64 solid running backs to use throughout the year.
So funnily enough, I have Donovan Edwards as my number 8 as well. but I have Blake Corum as my 5.
Okay.
And that's just because I like Travion Henderson as my 3 just a little bit more. I think he's another just a little bit more dynamic back. No, there's another Ohio State running back there that's kind of taking a lot of his snaps and stuff like that. But I think less tread on the tire is always helpful when you're going into the NFL, especially at the running back position. And I like what he offers. Like he can run in between the tackles, but he can run outside. He can catch. He can do everything that you need him to do in the running back position.
Yeah, and I have the other OSU running back as well on my list. He's number 10, Mayan Williams. But Travion's number 4 for me. So moving on to 5, I got Trey Benson from FSU, one of those other weapons that we talked about for Jordan Travis. He's a solid, not a big body, but he's a solid running back that is he's just doing what he does for Florida State. He could get into the end zone. I think he had a 2 touchdown game. Was it last week or the week? I don't think it was against Clemson. I think it was the week before.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's got a nose for the end zone, but he's just one of those many cogs that are in that FSU offense. So it's like you're not going to get real big flashy numbers because the ball is distributed all over the place. But I think he could be a nice little compliment back in the NFL. I don't think he's going to really be that number 1 70% guy, but I think he could be a nice compliment.
Yeah, and he's my number 7. So I like him too. I just like Will Shipley at 6, and my guy that I think is the Damian Pierce, I think, is Rasheen Ali from Marshall. He's my number 4. I love Rasheen Ali. I've pounded the table for him already multiple times, like you with Braylon Allen. The guy just produces, and I think he's the real deal. I mean, he's the only true, like he could be the one true workhorse back, but he's going to get a time split, and I think that might even be better for him because, like, what I've been arguing with Cam Akers going to the Vikings is Cam Akers and Alexander Madison are good players for 10 to 15 touches. So if you give them both 10 to 15 touches, they're going to produce. They're not good with 20 to 25 touches each, or just one of them being that kind of back. I think that's where Ali can be pretty dynamic. So then that makes my top 5: Allen, Sanders, Henderson, Ali, Corum. And then I've touched on Benson and Edwards already. Those were my 7 and 8s. So who's your 6?
My 6 was Shipley as well, so I got him up
Dude,
there.
yeah.
I think
Go ahead.
Well, who's your 6 through 10? Because I think for the most part we have basically 8 of the same guys. So I want to see who the 2 different. I don't have
Ali, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have him. And then who's
6? So my 6 is Shipley, and then I have Benson at 7, Edwards at 8, and then I have Bucky Irving and Audric Estime as my 10. I'm still believing in the Bucky Irving train. I think he can be an Antonio Gibson type back. I just hope he doesn't go to Washington for that. And then Audric Estime, I think it's more he's going to get the hype from Notre Dame and stuff like that. So someone's going to take him, and then he could be, I guess it's really hard to say he could be the Roshan Johnson of this year because he's the starter, but he has just a lot of those traits that he can just do kind of everything. And a lot of people like that kind of back. So if you're looking into the 2nd and 3rd round and he's still on the board, you're going to be like, yeah, I'll take that all day.
Yeah, Audric Estime was my 9. So he made the list for me. I already mentioned Mayan Williams at 10. So the only other guy that I have that you didn't have was out of Maryland, Roman Hemby, and he came in at number 7 for me. Little not small, but like he's not like A-chain small, but he's closer to like Jahmyr Gibbs size, and those size running backs really aren't like they're not bell cows in the NFL. We've even seen when Jamal Williams went down in that game where it wasn't even Jahmyr Gibbs the next guy up, and he wasn't the one running between the tackles. They brought in I forgot what the hell his name was, but it was so I don't know if Hemby is going to be the guy that runs between the tackles, or if they're going to use him. Unless he could bulk up. He's 6 foot 200, so it's not like he's tiny, but he's
no, yeah.
if he needs to add some pounds. But Roman Hemby out of Maryland. So Braylon Allen, Sanders, Blake Corum, Travion Henderson, Trey Benson, Will Shipley, Roman Hemby, Donovan Edwards, Audric Estime, and Mayan Williams are my 10. Which kicks us off with wide receivers.
I think we have the same number one. That's Marvin Harrison Jr. He's self-explanatory. I think we might have the same number two as well, and that's the other Ohio State wide receiver. It's Emeka Egbuka. I don't know. I like, from what I've seen with his young quarterback, Egbuka is showing that he's reliable. I think he's like the Chris Olave of that team, that he can destroy any zone that's at him, and he's got a knack to finding the ball and getting open. So I really like what he's been doing.
Yeah, so we both have Harrison 1. That's a no-brainer. He's been 1 for at least the last year and a half on most boards. I think our ones are unanimous across all 4 of the positions. And my number 2 is kind of the Joe Burrow effect. And what I mean by that is it's somebody that just came along really well this year. He actually wasn't even the number, well, I guess you can't say that, but he wasn't my favorite guy from this team right off the bat, but he kind of just like moved his way up there. You want to take a guess?
Keen Coleman?
Yep.
Yeah.
Keen Coleman from FSU. He's got a knack for the end zone. Couple multi-touchdown games so far already this season, and he's got nice size. He's got nice hands. He's playing behind or next to Johnny Wilson, who's also on my list. Kind of dropped down a little bit though, but he is. I think he's going to be a quarterback's best friend as early as maybe week 4 next year, and then he's not going to look back.
Yep, I agree with you there. I have him as my 8, but that's just because there's a lot of guys that are up there. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the top 8 the top 8 that I have, maybe even all 10 are in the first 3 rounds, because wide receiver is pretty deep. So my 3 is Malik Neighbors, LSU. He's finally starting to show out of what he can actually do. I mean, his route running is impeccable, and he's showing that he can catch the deep ball as long as someone can throw it to him. And that's why, I mean, you have Jaden Daniels all the way up in the top 5 of your quarterbacks, right? I mean, he's starting to show out too. So, I mean, as an LSU fan, I love him. So,
and he's also my number 3. So that means Egbuka is number 4 for
gotcha.
me.
My number 4 would be Xavier Worthy. I like what I'm seeing from him too. He's got a lot of the same abilities as Malik Neighbors. So,
yeah, and you've mentioned on a couple episodes specifically that you like the Worthy types. Worthy is he is number 6 for me.
Okay. Yeah.
No, he's 7. Sorry, it's number 7 for me. I mean, I like what he's doing too. Quinn Ewers is in my top 10, so definitely liking having his weapon there. One of his two weapons that I have on the list here. The other one is one of the tight ends, but he's one of those. We've already mentioned it before. He's one of those guys that kind of remind us of those smaller, shifty wide receivers that are ones for their team. Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave.
Yep.
I think that Xavier Worthy is going to be. He could very well be like the 3rd wide receiver off the board in the draft. And
is he as refined as Neighbors is? I don't think so. Not right at this minute, but he can be. So that's why I just have him right below Neighbors. But I can see why you would have him farther down the list for sure. But like you said, I like those types of wide receivers a lot more.
Yeah, they're that's quarterbacks want guys and teams want guys that are going to get open, and him and Neighbors are going to be 2 of those guys, 2 of the better route runners in the class too. Skipping around a little bit, number 5 for me is Troy Franklin out of Oregon. You got him on yours?
He's my number 6.
Number 6. All right, perfect.
Yep.
My 6 is Johnny Wilson at FSU. We already mentioned him. I had to have a big body on mine. Going back to the year 1952, I've just loved big body wide receivers. So Johnny Wilson is my big body. Hopefully he doesn't end up like a Kelvin Benjamin in the league or Devin Funches or something like that. Hopefully he's latches on with the team and catches double-digit touchdowns for his career.
For sure. Franklin was my 6th. The only guy above him that I have is Rome Dunes from Washington. And that's just because it might be because of Penix, but I like what he's been doing. But I also have his teammate, Jalen McMillan, at right under Franklin. So what is that, at 7? And then I round out the 8 and 10 are my Kean Coleman and Johnny Wilson for the same reasons that you have. I do have Johnny Wilson on there. I've just been burned by too many big receivers that I don't like the big receivers as much anymore, but some of them proved me wrong. But Johnny Wilson, you can see that he still has it. So I will put him, I'll give him his due.
Yeah, I got both Washington guys at 8 and 9 as well. So we got
one guy left. My 9, I think your 7.
My 7 was Worthy. I'm missing
sorry.
my 10.
I have Dorian Singer as my 9.
I got Dorian Singer as my 10.
Yeah. So,
we got the same top 10, just in different order.
Yep. So, yeah, Dorian Singer, I mean, he's Williams' favorite weapon. He's kind of the forgotten receiver, I would say, in this group, because a lot of the other ones have really showed out a little bit more. But he's going to be a wide receiver that might be drafted a little bit higher than expected because he can do everything. And that's what you want. So the wide receiver draft this year is deep, and I'd be happy with any of those 10 guys.
Yeah, any of those 10, just even getting into maybe one of them or a couple of them slip to the late 3 and get them in. And we haven't even mentioned guys so we obviously have the same 1 through 10, just in a different order, but there's Adonai Mitchell from Texas. Yep. There's Mario Williams from USC.
Yep.
Probably missing. I'm missing plenty of others. I'm sure there's gonna be 30 of them drafted, but we only mentioned really 10 of them with those 2 bonus names too. So definitely a deep class. I think it's. Obviously Marvin Harrison is the cream of the crop. He has been. I think that the number 1 Marvin Harrison is probably be the number 1 in last year's class. Possibly be the number 1 in the year before. Who was number 1? Who was number 1 2 years ago? I can't remember. Yeah,
right off the top of my head.
We're not back to Chase and Jefferson yet. So
yeah.
You got to get back to Chase and Jefferson to really think about. Okay, do I want Harrison? Do I want Chase? Do I want Harrison? Do I want Jefferson?
So, all right, and what? CeeDee Lamb was the first one off the board on that year. So
in the Jefferson class. Yep. So But yeah, I think the past 2 years. Well, no, yeah, last year was Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave.
Well, that was 2 years ago. Yeah.
Number 1 and 2, after the fact, but
yep. So
like London and. All right, moving on to the tight ends. Don't have to spend a lot of time here. I think we mentioned it pretty much every episode that every team has 3 tight ends basically, and some of them catch footballs and some of them just stand back there and block. But there's going to be a bunch of them drafted. There's going to be a bunch of them as UDFAs after the fact. The number 1 consensus and could be a top 10 overall pick in the actual NFL draft is Brock Bowers. Really not much to say about him. Brought him up many times. He's like a hybrid Kelsey, hybrid Kittle kind of player that he can block. He can run routes. He's fast. And I've been excited about him for the last couple of years and just kind of stockpiling 2024 picks. You got anything additional on him?
I saw a stat actually today on him that he's on pace to break 29 tackles as a tight end. And I think Kelsey and Gronk haven't broken 29 tackles in their career. So, he's a specimen. That's all we can really say. So, yeah, obviously he's the consensus number 1. We might have the consensus of the same one on 2. Maybe they might be swapped at 2 and 3 for us, but.
Well, let's see. Who's your 2?
My 2 is Jatavian Sanders for Texas.
That's my 3.
I like how his athletic ability. He needs to work on his blocking a little bit, but he's getting there. So your 2 is the Florida
Stover.
State? Oh, Stover. Okay. Nice.
Yeah, Stover's my 2 OSU. I think he's one of the more athletic guys too. Could definitely go out there and catch the ball, and I kind of rank these guys more fantasy wise. Like I
Yep.
want because when it comes to tight ends, you don't care about really like blocking gets you on the field, and so in order for you to be on the field, you got to know how to block and protect your quarterback. But you're not going to start a guy like Mo Alley Cox because he's back there blocking for Anthony Richardson 90% of the time.
Right,
So
right.
like, you want guys that are going to go out there and catch the ball. So Bowers, obviously, Stover, and Sanders are the top 3, and then um, I I like Jaheim Bell a lot, but like I mentioned before, he's a little smaller for a tight end, so I don't know exactly where he's going to be, what position they're going to really put him at, or if he's going to remain a tight end and have the tight end eligibility, or if he's going to be a fullback and then you got to throw him in your running back spot. I'm not sure
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
that's
I got him
true.
at 5, so Eric All is my 4 from Iowa.
Gotcha. Jaheim Bell is my third because I thought he isn't every down type of player, but yeah, he is a little small. So I actually think your concerns are valid, and I think I would. Now that I think about it, I might move him down the list. I have Stover at 7 because I think it's just the Ohio State bias. When's the last great tight end from Ohio State to come out? I don't know. So
Yeah,
it just I have to see it to believe it. And then obviously Eric All is my 5 actually. I do like what he's doing, but again, it's my boy at 4. I have to put him in my top 5 because I love him. It's Brevin Spanford from Minnesota.
yeah,
I've unfortunately had to watch 3 Minnesota games just because it's in my region, and he's playing in the slot at 6'7", 270, and he's getting routes and beating linebackers and stuff. So it's like he's gonna be hopefully going a little higher than we expect, but he's gonna be running routes as well. Now I hope he's not like a O'Keefe for Tampa Bay that no, we just brought him in to block because he's way more athletic than that. He needs to get some routes in the NFL, and I think he could really do well with it.
yeah. And then I'll just rattle off my last 5. I mean, I got Spanford at 6.
Yep.
So my final 4 I'll rattle off, and we're really looking at like 4th, 5th, 6th round NFL guys that might take a
Yep.
couple years to get acclimated anyways. And even now with Kate Otten, a lot of hype on him, and we're still like hesitant to start him on a weekly basis. And that's kind of like how these guys are. Like maybe Brevin Jordan was another one. Brevin Jordan
Yep.
was one with Houston where we were kind of excited, and then all of a sudden they bring in Schultz, and now Jordan kind of just takes a back seat, and like that's kind of like how these guys are. Where these guys are going to be drafted behind guys that are pretty much established, and
Yep.
then we're going to be hanging on to them under our taxi, and then 3 years down the line, they're never going to get their chance. But Benjamin Urasek from Stanford, Bryson Nesbitt from UNC, McCallum Castles from Tennessee, and then Luke Lachey, however you say it, from Iowa.
So I didn't put Lachey on my list just because I think he left the game last week with a broken ankle. So I'm guessing he's going to go back to school just because of that reason. But I have McAllen Castles on there, and then I had Cade Stover, and then I had Michael Trigg, Ole Miss, Ben Sinnott from Kansas State, and then Caden Priestcorn from Ole Miss. And I like Urasek too. It's just his team is so bad that I think he's gonna just get the shaft in the draft. But he can show out in the Senior Bowl and stuff like that, and I think that'll help his stock. But I don't think he's going to be in a bunch of top tens just because of that until then. But he is athletic, and he's probably one of the more athletic ones, and he deserves to be on a top 6 tight end drafted for sure.
Yeah, these are, like I said, these are guys that you're not drafting these guys if you have a 3-round rookie draft. But if you got a 5-round rookie draft,
Yes.
the 5th round, you ended up with a couple extra picks because you made trades and somebody threw a 5 at you. You're using that pick on one of these guys. But that's basically what we have for today. That's our top, not not in order, but top 40 list, basically 10 from each position. That we're going to be seeing a lot of these guys on NFL Sundays next year. Most of them, maybe even the tight ends too, out there blocking, getting 4 snaps a game. But it'll be interesting. It's going to be it'll be fun. There's a big week